The Order 1886, especially in the current climate of the gaming industry, is a massive can of worms. I had been hearing opinions from all over the board on this game ever since it released back in February of 2015, but until now had never caved and picked it up. When I saw it for $5 on the flash sale, I decided it was finally time to experience this oh so controversial title for myself. I completed this game in just 2 days and recorded the entire thing front to back. This is a game that truly deserves to be talked about, as it represents perfectly everything right and everything wrong with the whole idea of the cinematic gaming experience, as it is so called. Welcome to The Overthinker. Let's think this over. Most people who haven't played it know of The Order 1886 as that really short game with the really good graphics. And for the most part, that is pretty true. A lot of people unfamiliar with it seem to have barely any idea what it is, which is understandable as the game isn't much of anything. This game is a bog-standard third-person cover shooter. You duck behind walls, peek out, and kill people by the hundreds, just as you would in any other game of this nature. And with next to nothing to set it apart from the crowd, this game's actual gameplay just gets lost in a sea of infinitely more creative titles. However, a deep gameplay experience isn't what this game was going for, so let's give it the benefit of the doubt for a second. The Order 1886 isn't trying to be an enriching gameplay experience. To put it simply, this game wants to be a jaw-dropping visual and storytelling experience that uses gameplay to tell you a story and deliver you fancy visuals. This game, probably more than any other game ever, wants to be a cinematic experience, and before you let that trigger you, take some time to step back and think on what that actually means. This kind of idea has been done before, and quite successfully, might I add, with the likes of the Uncharted franchise. This game, however, tries to go even further into this cinematic idea than Uncharted ever did. We've got extremely stylized camera angles, quick time events everywhere, and cutscenes. Dear Lord, this game is one 6-hour-long cutscene. Oh, but of course there are pictures to waste your time on. And newspapers. Plenty of ridiculously long, obviously padding newspapers. I mean, for the love of God, this entire game is even broadcast in a 16:9 aspect ratio that you would see in a movie theater. A lot of people really complain about that last part specifically, but I actually ended up finding it charming. It's one of the few things that gives this game a unique identity, and if you are truly going for the whole cinematic thing, then you might as well go the whole 9 yards. This game wants to be an experience far more than it wants to be a game. The gameplay is simple and generic by design, as it was intended to be something that could be doctored into a heavily directed fest of flashy graphics and storytelling. This ends up working beautifully in some areas, and downright falling on its own face in others. A game like this is going to live and die on its narrative and presentation. One of those things it does phenomenally, the other it does... As is my style, let's start with the narrative. I'm not going to go quite as in-depth with this as I did with Sonic Forces, but I'm going to analyze it all the same. The core premise of this game is fascinating. You play as a member of the Knights of the Round Table, which has evolved over the years into an independent police force that works to fight lycans, or werewolves, in Victorian London. As Sir Galahad, you are a member of Her Majesty's elite knights, and are a trained specialist dedicated to hunting down and eliminating the werewolf scourge from London wherever it may pop up. Sprinkle in a rebellion so you have some generic humans to shoot, and boom, you have a premise. Holy crap! Is the idea for this game cool? Werewolves, ancient orders, people in fancy clothes, magic healing water, freak, and awesome steampunk gadgets made by Nikola Tesla. Holy crap! Their Q is Nikola Tesla! Forgive me as I go cry tears of nerd joy at the mere concept of this premise. The game opens with the main character being brutally tortured in some underground catacombs. We get one of the most guided opening sequences I've ever seen, and eventually escape to be confronted by some men that claim, "We have betrayed our order." We jump off the building into the water, and then most of the rest of the game is a flashback. You know, I really hate when stories do this. If we're gonna end up defecting from the Order, don't tell us that right from the beginning. I know you want to have a flashy intro and all, but make that be an awesome werewolf hunt. Don't spoil one of the biggest plot twists in the game itself. But whatever, that's what the story is, I guess. So we flash back to several days before all that goes down and get treated to some shooting mixed with beautiful visuals of London. We get introduced to the character of Isabeau. Yes, just Isabeau, because apparently her parents were too cool to name her Isabel. And it is clear that she has a lot of history with our player character Galahad. They share some very well done dialogue that expertly develops their characters and shows the audience their relationship without having to resort to cheap exposition. I do have to commend the way this game introduces its world. It reminds me a lot of how the first Assassin's Creed introduced the Assassin's Brotherhood by letting us see it in action rather than just telling us about it. Show don't tell is done very well here. We fight our way through some rebels and get introduced to this health potion that the knights use to heal their wounds. It's this strange flask that they wear around their necks that seems to accelerate their healing to just an umpteenth degree. It's really cool and mysterious, and I like it. When we get underground, we get our first of only 4 encounters with the werewolves in the entire game. Yeah, this game wastes a lot of its premise on fighting these generic rebels rather than the far more interesting supernatural creatures that inhabit this world. We get an awesome sequence where we chase a werewolf through Victorian London and kill it with a lightning cannon? Holy crap, that's cool! Okay, at this point, I had been playing for like 30 minutes, and I was already in love with the Order and its gadgets. The big clunky communicators, the unwieldy guns and steampunk gadgets, the silver knife used to slay werewolves. It's all nerd candy to me. Galahad spots Sir Percival speaking with some hooded man who we never learned the identity of. I hate sequel setups. And, well, we'll later find out that this entire game is a sequel setup. And we learn from the police that a lot of havoc has been coming out of Whitechapel with the Ripper killings, the rebels, and the werewolves. By the way, this game only ever calls the werewolves Lycans, but I'm just gonna call them werewolves. We take the matter before the Round Table and get a lot of well-done info as to how the Order works. Basically, the Lord Chancellor controls everything and is a total jerk the whole game. He denies the crew the opportunity to investigate the disturbances in Whitechapel, but Galahad, Isabeau, and the dashing and somewhat perverted Frenchman Lafayette, I totally love this guy, and Percival organize a covert mission with Isabeau's brother Lucan, the Knight Commander, into Whitechapel anyway. So we go to Whitechapel, and things do not remain covert. Yes. Good idea, Galahad. Call in air support on your covert mission. Any sympathy I would have ever had for your character is gone. Forever. So, of course, we go and shoot some generic rebels, and end up in the London hospital, which has been overrun by werewolves. We trek through one of the most terrifying and immersive environments in gaming history, and get a beautiful yet totally gameplay-devoid boss fight against an elder werewolf. Seriously, this fight is a visual sight to behold, but in terms of how it plays, it is pretty much just an extended quick-time event. Isabeau gets her back broken, and while her potion is working to heal her, we discover a plan by the rebels to hijack the Agamemnon, a massive dirigible owned by the United India Company that is carrying a massive shipment of something to the Americas. They intend to assassinate Lord Hastings, the company's leader and highly valued ally to the Knights. We go and stop it, because we're just that awesome. There are a lot of explosions, we shoot more generic rebels, and by the end of this sequence we see Percival attempt to calm down a suicide bomber, even going so far as to call him friend. Bada bing, e bada boom. Bomber explodes, ship crashes, and we find Percival dead. From this point on, Galahad becomes Sir Pissed Off. We return to the Round Table and Lafayette takes Percival's place, giving us a well-handled explanation of more of how the Order works. We get chewed out by the Lord Chancellor, but things get interrupted when another assassination attempt is being made on Lord Hastings, conveniently right outside the Knight headquarters. Seriously, how stupid are these rebels? Why would you ever mount an assassination attempt only a few feet away from the headquarters of your greatest enemies, who, need I mention, are also effectively immortal? Now out for vengeance, Galahad murders more rebels by the hundreds and goes all Batman on one leader, eventually learning the location of the rebel leader. He goes to her and agrees to learn her side of the story while also characteristically maintaining his loyalty to the Knights and not giving up his devotion so quickly. We kill generic guards for quite a while and find that the United India Company is planning to ship vampires and werewolves to the Americas. Since the Order and United India Company are so closely linked, it is clear that there is a conspiracy going on. We torch the place and then leave.
Many have witnessed him.
The Lord Chancellor dismisses our discovery as baseless, so we ask Lucan to help us infiltrate the United India Company's headquarters for proof. With the help of the rebel leader, we do this, only to be betrayed as we discover that Lord Hastings is a vampire, and Jack the Ripper, and that Lucan is a werewolf. We are captured and arrested by Lafayette and Isabeau, and then we relive the opening. Nikola Tesla nurses us back to health with the help of the rebel leader. We return to the rebel leader and disavow the Knights permanently. Isabeau swears unto God that she will bring us to justice, and we get a final confrontation with Lafayette, who gives up the opportunity to kill us as he believes that we must have a reason for what we are doing. Can I stop to talk about how much I love this moment? This does so much to develop not only the characters of Galahad and Lafayette, but also the relationship between knights. These two have been through so much together that Lafayette trusts Galahad so much that he won't believe that he is truly a turncoat. However, Lafayette is too dedicated to his role as a knight to give up his position. He is still a knight, but cannot possibly bring himself to hurt Galahad. This is excellent and organic character development, and the writers deserve kudos here. Isabeau's reaction to Galahad's betrayal is also brilliant, as it develops who she is as a wholehearted and dedicated knight, so dedicated to her role that she will even turn against the one she is most likely in love with in the name of her sworn duty. We return to the knight headquarters, murdering God knows how many innocent royal guards, to rescue Nikola. We get a final battle against Lucan in his werewolf form. It is revealed that his father, the Lord Chancellor, spared his life hundreds of years ago when he couldn't bring himself to kill a baby werewolf. Lucan begs for his life and claims that he was only fighting for his right to live. This brings up right on the tail end of the story something that could have been an interesting moral conflict, but unfortunately this dilemma has no time to develop, and Galahad does not even try to take it into consideration. We load a revolver, take aim, and...
What in... Intruders!
Wait. What? No. Don't cut me off here. Come on. That cannot be the ending. What about Lafayette's dilemma? What about Isabeau's vow? Are we just going to leave the introduction of vampires into this universe hanging in the air? We aren't going to resolve any of what's going on with the United India Company and Lord Hastings' vampirism. We aren't going to explain this hooded man at all. Why in the world would you leave so many threads open? Oh, right. You wanted to make a sequel, didn't you? Well, screw that! This game's mediocre critical reception and sales most likely means we'll never get that sequel, so now we're just left with this, an unfinished story that cuts out right as it's getting extremely good. Okay, so in retrospect, I think there's a lot of things that the story does right, and a lot that it does wrong. It's told beautifully. The writing, characterization, and world building are stellar for the whole of the roughly 6-hour runtime. I love these characters, and think they have a wealth of potential, but all of the great development they are going through just gets cut off in the name of sequel bait. I absolutely adore the world this is set in. I think the plot twist of throwing in vampires halfway through is beautiful, but like everything else, it gets cut off right as it starts getting really cool. What we have here feels like half of a great story. This game was designed to be a part 1, not to be a full story in and of itself, and that is the biggest issue here. The game is over right as it is beginning. I don't think the story is bad by any means. I was thoroughly invested from start to finish. It just doesn't have a finish. The story isn't offensive by any means, but for a story in a game that has pretty much nothing else going for it, this needed to be better. The story needed to be absolutely amazing for this to work, as narrative and visuals are all this game is going for. In terms of games that are built around being story-driven, I have seen both much worse and much better. Now for the part of this game that knocks it out of the park. The presentation. This game was designed with presentation in mind from the ground up, and darn does it show. This game is 3 years old now, and it is still arguably the single most graphically stunning game I have ever seen. The amount of animation quality, detail, lighting effects, and all sorts of other brilliant visual design choices bring to life this world like nothing else. I mean, some of these environments are absolutely brilliant. The posh interior of the Order's headquarters, the downtrodden slums of Whitechapel, the unstable rafters of the Agamemnon, the horrifying halls of the London Hospital, and the musty catacombs underneath the headquarters. This game's stellar visual design creates one of the most immersive gaming experiences practically ever. Almost nothing I have seen even comes close to bringing to life a world like this game does. I have never felt more like I was actually present in a game world than I did while playing this game. The camera angles can make for some of the tensest experiences I've ever had. To put it simply, the visual flair of this game is through the roof and into the stratosphere. On a technical level, this game is a sight to behold. I am glad they pulled this off with flying colors, as without it, I don't think this game would have had anything going for it at all. If you can get it for a decent price, this game is honestly worth experiencing for the visuals alone, as it is a treat that is not to be missed. However, of course there is a catch. All of this beauty is little but a cover over one of the blandest games I've ever played. This game is a brutally generic cover shooter. You shoot generic human after generic human after generic human for the whole 6 hours. Enemies are absolute morons. There is little to no challenge to be had, and beyond a few interesting gadget weapons, there is nothing interesting going on here that hasn't been done 1,000 times before. You have a bunch of pretty generic weapons to work with, such as submachine guns, carbines, semi-automatic and fully automatic pistols, and shotguns. There are a few special guns in the game, such as the falchion, the incendiary shotgun, the thermite rifle, the arc gun, and the detonator. And while these guns are cool, they aren't really all that practical. They may be fun to use, but the basic weapons are almost always the more effective option, and whenever you do get to use the cool weapons, it's mostly for a situational story beat anyway. The devs fell back on boring regenerative health, although there is an interesting mechanic where you can save yourself from death by drinking your black water once per confrontation. One thing I will give them is that the black sight mechanic is one of the cooler takes on bullet time, allowing you to snap between visible enemies and blast bullet after bullet into them until they are butt-fixed. It's ridiculously satisfying, and I wish it was part of a much better game. The actual environments of the combat as well are also ridiculously boring. Just a bunch of tiny environments with chest-high walls. Nothing like the wide-open battlefields you can find in the likes of similar games like Uncharted 4. Granted, that game came out several years later than this one, so yes, I'll cut it slack there. They do have, stealth in 2 whole sections of gameplay. It amounts to waiting until enemies come around corners and pressing triangle so they die. Nothing of interest or depth going on here at all. They do make an absolutely pitiful attempt at climbing mechanics, but the sequences are so guided they might as well just be cutscenes, which honestly can be said for quite a bit of this game. Beyond the rebels, the only other kind of enemies you're ever gonna get to fight are the werewolves, which you only get to fight twice. The werewolves are hilariously awful. They charge at you, you dodge them, shoot them, and when they are down, you stab them and they die. Come on! Werewolves are some of the most iconic and versatile supernatural creatures in all of folklore, and the best you can do with them is have them charge you like idiots? Knights with steampunk gadgets fighting werewolves is awesome, but if this is what werewolves are like in this universe, I honestly don't think we need an order at all, and sheesh. The 2 werewolf bosses we get may be stunning to watch, but they are literally just 5-minute QuickTime events. One of them is the final boss. Yeah, the final boss of this game is a glorified QuickTime event. That is sad. The gameplay experience throughout this game is devoid of inspiration. It isn't offensive or bad, it is just so mind-numbingly generic that you won't come out of it remembering any particular section of gameplay. That being said, The visuals, animations, and camera angles make this dull gameplay look like some of the most exciting stuff you will ever see. It sure is a ride to play through, but there is nothing to it at all when you look deeper than a teaspoon into it. So do I like this game? Yes. Do I think this is a good game? Nah. A game like this can work like magic. There is potential for a game of this style to be a great experience, and I think the devs realize that. They either just didn't have the time, money, or the inspiration to pull it off fully. At the end of the day, I could excuse the not bad, but vapid gameplay, as that's not the point of this game. The point is story and presentation. The presentation is nailed here like nothing else I've ever seen, but the story, while awesome, gets cut off. I genuinely am a huge fan of this universe and its characters, and it hurts to know that I may never get to see a sequel due to how middling this game's sales and reviews were. But, hey, if The Evil Within is anything to go by, it might not be impossible. I think this game is important because it represents the furthest of a trend that we have been seeing, especially in console games. The turn to more cinematic-styled games is becoming more and more prevalent, with classic titles like God of War even making the shift. It is clear that the success of Uncharted and The Last of Us are making waves in the way games are developed now, but a lot of these games don't understand what makes those games work so well. The gameplay in Uncharted and The Last of Us complements the story and presentation, as opposed to here where the gameplay is filler between it, almost as if it was begrudgingly tacked on. Uncharted and The Last of Us feature well-written and fulfilling narratives with a satisfying beginning, middle, and end that, for the most part, avoid sequel bait, whereas here, this story was written specifically to be part one and not a story in and of itself. I'm gonna end this with an opinion. This game deserves a sequel, and the devs deserve a second chance to achieve the parts of their vision that they didn't pull off the first time around. At this point, I am dying to see where the story goes from here, and I'd love to see the potential for better gameplay that this universe could have. Better stealth mechanics, more gadgets and cool weapons, better AI, dialogue trees, and a more finished narrative could all be accomplished without sacrificing the style and the presentation. At this point, I am eagerly awaiting a sequel to see if what this game fails at can be accomplished, mainly because I believe this style can be done right, and I want a sequel to come out and prove me right. Until then, however, The Order 1886 stands as an example of how graphics alone cannot mask a bland experience, and the developer's vision has been lost somewhere on the black bars on top and bottom of the screen. This has been The Overthinker. Thank you for thinking with me. Good day to you all.